Sanbonani Dumelang, good evening and welcome to episode 150 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzama Ntungwa Khumalo. It's a Monday edition of the Private Property Podcast and we're very excited this week. We're celebrating our 150th episode and we're very happy that you have walked this journey with us from the first episode that we had all the way in March. If this is the first time that you're joining us here on the Private Property Podcast, then welcome. You've certainly missed out on quite a lot, but this evening's episode is actually going to give you a good snapshot of some of the good stuff that you've missed. And if anything, you're able to now go back to some of the older great episodes that we've had throughout the months and really get a good sense of what are some of the gaps that you probably need to fill even in your own property knowledge. Doesn't matter whether you're a property investor, whether you're a renter, perhaps you're a new-time landlord or a first-time home buyer, we certainly do cater to all of you at home. And beyond this particular episode, of course, we also have the first-time home buyers show, which comes to screens every Wednesday at 7:45. So that's right after this podcast. And all things agriculture, we also look at the farming podcast every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. We never leave you alone over the weekend. We also have the developer show, where we showcase some of the best developments that this country has on offer. So there's always something for you here on Private Property, and it really doesn't matter where in your property journey you are. And if anything, it actually makes me very excited because that's one of the things that we asked you. So we are running a competition. We're only going to be doing it for this evening, but we thought, you know what, it's a big week. We're celebrating 150. So let's actually do a giveaway every single day for this week. So this evening, we wanted to find out from you what have been some of the big things that you've learned along your journey by watching the Private Property Podcast, and share with us what some of those were and how they've impacted your life or your property journey. And we will be announcing that lucky winner at the end of the show, who's going to be walking away with 1,000 Rand cash prize. Remember, the T's and C's is that we're announcing the winner live here on air. The winner has to respond to us on Facebook. So you have to be watching the podcast in order for you to be able to win. Because we're going to announce the winner and then you must message us on Facebook immediately, identifying yourself. Otherwise, we go to the next person. And so that's for this evening. And we're going to carry on with that very same question. And for the rest of the week, you also stand a chance of walking away with 500 Rand cash for the rest of the week. So we are in a giving away, mood. We are, of course, also getting ready for the festive season. It is the season of giving. And I think all of us can need, that little bit of extra cash in our pockets. Well, to get started with our conversation this evening, we have put together a panel of experts who saying, ask Private Property, your questions relating to all things property. And we want to hear from you. I mean, if you've probably ever struggled with something, maybe it was in the early stages of your property journey, maybe you're a tenant, you're not quite sure what you need in order for you to transition to becoming a homeowner, then do send through those questions and our panel of experts is going to be digging deep into them. And these are ladies who need no introduction. We've had them before and we've spoken about different things in our property journey. And to just briefly go through who we'll be speaking to this evening, we've got Zayda Manuel, who's a product portfolio manager for first-time home buyers at Absa Home Loans. So we're looking at all the things that we certainly want to hear from the bank's perspective when it comes to your home ownership journey, whether you're a first-time home buyer or, of course, you are buying for the second or for the third time. Zayda, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Evening, Zama. Thank you for having me here this evening again. Thank you.
It's only a pleasure, Zayda. And then we've also got Candice Van Wyk, who's a co-founder. She's an entrepreneur and a property investor herself of Property Pick. Candice, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Zama. Thank you for having me. Awesome to be back with you.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Candice. And of course, from Candice, if you are a property investor, Candice is certainly the woman that you want on your team. So we'll be looking at some of the things that you should be thinking about the moment you want to step into the investment journey. What kind of decisions what kind of questions should we be asking before you approach a bank when you're looking at buying your first rental property? And then Natasha Champion, she's a regional sales manager at Uber Home Loans. And Natasha, good evening. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Hi, Zama. Only a pleasure. So happy to be here.
It's only a pleasure. And Natasha, of course, works for Uber Home Loans. And I think this is probably a great place to start our competition this evening. I'm going to start with you, Natasha, because I think oftentimes people, sometimes people ask me questions where I'm like, if you worked with a bond originator, that would have probably, helped you significantly. So people want to know, how can I negotiate, for better interest rates? Should I be approaching all the different banks individually? That seems like so much admin. Perhaps firstly, just take us through the benefit of working with, bond originators. Uber Home Loans does it very well. I've shared on the podcast, I've used Uber Home Loans on more than one occasion. So what are the benefits for, viewers at home for using bond originators?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So it's great to get a personal recommendation. It always goes far. What we do is we are first and foremost a home loan comparison service. So what that means is that we consolidate all the bank requirements into one application, which can now be done online. The supporting docs are provided, and we submit simultaneously up to 8 banks, depending on the client's personal profile. We will give the client feedback from every single lender, and then take the steps to negotiate the terms and conditions we prefer from each one.
And I think then, Natasha, when we look at people who would probably want to go to each and every individual, financial institution, why would you discourage them from doing that individual application, let's say 5 or up to 8 times to different financial institutions, instead of working with sort of, a bond originator where they do those applications on your behalf and you only have to deal with one?
So I think they're untold reasons, but let's start with the 2 main ones. Number one, the purchaser is not a home loans expert. So indeed, the average banker is not a home loans expert. They sell various products. At Uber Home Loans, we do all home loans all day long. So we know how to position that application to ensure the best result. And number 2, the time and administration it takes is active, is open to such an extent that the banks actually pay us to process those bonds, because they manage to do away with kind of the staff requirements that it takes in their processing center to do that work. So make use of someone that A, is an expert, B, can save you time, and C, does all of this free of charge.
And I want to bring in Zayda, because I think, Zayda, when we look at first-time home buyers, and sometimes even people who have actually bought a property, because this is also one of those things that not only I get asked quite a lot, but we get this question a lot on, across the various social media platforms on private property, especially the Facebook page. So I certainly urge viewers at home, the competition that we're running is running on our Facebook page. I know you might be probably watching us on Twitter and thinking, I may have missed that post. It is on Facebook, so we do urge you to hop on over to our Facebook page if you want to win that particular competition. So that's the only platform that we're using to enter this specific competition for the duration of the week. And Zayda, one of the questions that we get asked a lot, especially on our Facebook page, is around what are the banks looking for? It's almost as though people get very intimidated about, okay, what do financial institutions actually look for when you're a first-time home buyer? And I tend to find that this question doesn't just only come from, let's say, young professionals who've just started working, so they're not as clued up. This comes from young professionals, people who've probably been renting for a number of years and have already been working for a number of years, to people well into their 40s and early 50s. So there's always this question around what exactly are financial institutions looking for before they grant you that first home loan, especially if they're going to give you 100% home loan.
Thank you, Zama. What a great question. I think it's a common question. So what banks look for, I think individually first, with all applicants, first sit down and check your budget. Review your budget, understand your affordability. As an individual, your expenses and your income. Second, then you're welcome to do utilize our home loan apps, home loan estimator, do a pre-qualification to see how much you could qualify for from a home loan perspective, to understand your budget and how much you could start shopping for a home. Thirdly, understand your credit record. Know your credit record. Understand, are you in good standing? Because banks definitely look for a good standing credit record. And you're also welcomed as in a consumer to draw a free credit report annually from people like Experian. Third, I would encourage you to look at the costs associated to home ownership. You know, there's quite a bit of costs, such as attorney fees, which is made up of bond registration cost, transfer cost, plan for one of the once-off municipality costs as well. Understand what's in your budget that would come new into your budget, things like rates and tax, insurance expenses, your moving costs when you're ready to move into your new home. And I said those are critical things to that banks would look out for, and that can also help you as an individual to prepare for home ownership. And as such, Sama, ABSA has great educational tools and enabling pre-buying tools that's located on our ABSA website that can help consumers make a decision, like our pre-qualification tool, which is our ABSA Home Loan Estimator, as well as we've got a free e-learning course that's available on our ABSA website that can teach anybody and everybody about the ins and outs of home ownership, which is accessible to everybody.
And you know, when I think about the free e-learning tool, I actually reflect on when I started my own property journey, or when I was getting more and more serious about buying my first property. I think I was around 22, 23. And so this was nearly, 7 years ago. And you found that back then there just wasn't that much information about property, certainly in South Africa, when it comes to the journey, when it comes to credit score. I mean, right now we have quite a lot of content across different social media platforms. You're even able to go to privateproperty.co.za, you go under the advice section, you get all kinds of content when it comes to that home ownership journey, and sometimes even from buying your primary residence, and then the moment you want to, buy investment properties, what should you be thinking about? And if anything, we probably take it for granted now how some of this information is available, especially because if I reflect nearly a decade ago when it wasn't there and I had an interest in property, but there just wasn't enough on the internet to learn about these things. So I do urge you at home to make use of the different places where you're able to find credible, resources when it relates to property, whether it's a private property website. I know Uber Home Loans also has really great content on their website. You've also, of course, got the ABSA website that also has really great content. So it's so important that you first equip yourself with as much knowledge as possible, because you're very likely going to avoid certain mistakes. And this is why I want to bring in Candice, because some people, you've probably bought your primary residence, or maybe you haven't bought your primary residence. You know that you actually want to do investment property right now. Perhaps you're not even thinking of moving out of home, or you're still renting. So the property that you want to buy is going to be an investment property, and you're not quite sure how you should be thinking about investment property, because so far the only thing you've probably done is live at home and rent out. So you're still not quite sure how should you be thinking about buying that first rental property. So Candice, how should people be thinking about that first investment property? Because that's also where you can make mistakes that can cost you a lot of money, or you can learn quite a lot that can set you up really well to be buying the next property. So what are some of the top things that we should be keeping in mind when we're looking at that first investment property?
Okay, so the first step after you have confirmed what your affordability is, for me, would definitely be to consider the structure that you're going to be buying property in. So most first-time home buyers think that the best way to invest in property is to buy it in their personal capacity. And that's not necessarily the best structure for you to buy property in. So if you are going to be doing your property investing as an investment business and you want to be generating positive income from that, it's important to consider that as a start. So you are able to register a business, and let's take, for example, you're going to be registering a P2Y and you're going to be buying property in that particular entity. If this is a new company, you will still stand as surety. So if you still need to go to the banks and for finance, of course, there is still the opportunity to stand as surety, even though it is a new business. So they will take that into consideration as well. So I think that's the first thing that you need to consider if you want to do your investing as a property investor. The second thing that I would say to you if you're getting started is, what strategy do you want to get started in as a start? And of course, like Zama said, if you don't know the different strategies in property, it's important then to get yourself educated in terms of what are the different strategies to consider. But let's say, for example, you decide that you want to invest into a buy-to-let property or maybe even a multi-let property. Now, just to give you the main difference between the two, a buy-to-let property is when you have one lease agreement in place. So that means that you've got a tenant staying in your property and you're going to be generating rental income from that tenant. And then, of course, a multi-let now involves multiple lease agreements. So you could have one property with multiple tenants staying on the property, either in different rooms, or maybe you've got different properties on the same property. Okay, so I think it's important to determine what your strategy is. And then from the start, you need to know that we are investing for profit income. So if you're going into a rental strategy, you need to know that when you deduct all of your costs from your rental income, you need to know that you're going to be making profit income, because that's the reason, you know, why you also want to get started, is to generate another stream of income. And at the same time, you want to ensure that you buy your property at the right price so that it can obviously, you know, also grow in value from that perspective. So I think those are some of the first things that you need to consider, you know, when you get started: the structure, definitely the strategy. And then the next thing would be then to determine whether there is demand for the type of property that you are considering in that particular area. So remember, as trained investors, we also can't just go into any area and think that we're going to be generating profit income from our deals. So it's also important to determine, is there a demand for buy-to-let property in that particular area or multi-let? Also determine, you know, what type of rental income you would be able to generate from that buy-to-let property, so that you can start running your numbers to see if you're going to be generating a profit or a loss.
We are, of course, this evening celebrating our 150th episode, and we've put together a special panel of experts who are helping us answer some of your burning property questions, whether you're a first-time home buyer, perhaps you're a renter, or looking at buying that second property. Do send through your questions on Facebook, on Instagram, or on YouTube. Our experts of guests are here to answer them. I'm actually going to squeeze in a question before we go for our break. This question is coming in from Facebook. It is Chantal Kortboom who asks, Hi all, my husband wants to take out a second bond. Is there a possibility of getting 100% bond? My first bond I did on my own before I got married. Zeda, I think I'll throw that one at you.
Thank you, Zama. That's a great question. And I think, look, it's always good to understand your affordability, as I mentioned earlier, but welcoming and a home loan application, certainly. Review your budget, understand your affordability, and check your credit score. And based on your income and expenses evaluated through your home loan application, the bank will then assess that from a credit assessment perspective and would determine if you're good for lending for a second home loan as well. Yeah, we've got great products available for our repeat buyers, and they are located and do support the decisions for our second home time buyers. And the product suite is available on our APSA website as well.
Yeah. Natasha, I actually also would like you to answer this one. When you look at people who take out second bonds, you know, what are some of the perhaps mistakes that you see them potentially making in that second application? I mean, one of them that I can almost think of at the top of my head is that they might apply for a second bond before they can actually afford it. So you've probably maxed out your affordability when you bought your first property. You haven't had that salary increase, and that first property you probably live in it. So there hasn't really been any change in your income as you go and sort of apply for that second bond. But what are some of the perhaps mistakes that you see second home buyers making, and how can they probably best remedy that so that they're able to position themselves for getting that second home loan, especially to get that 100% home loan, as Chantal says that that's what they're aiming for?
Okay, so firstly, I'd like to understand, is it a further loan on an existing property, or is it a brand new loan on a second property?
It's a brand new loan on a second property. Okay,
great. So in that case, you know, absolutely. The couple potentially, now that there's a second applicant in place, the affordability would increase. So, you know, I have to echo what Zaid has already said. It's all down to affordability and credit record. You know, your best chance of approval is going to be, even though 100% bonds are very much on the table, the best outcome for not only your chances of approval, but certainly a preferential interest rate would be to put down as much of a deposit as you can if you do have it, bearing in mind that there will be additional costs that I think Zayda touched on before. So the pitfalls are extending yourself in terms of affordability. Interest rates are fantastic at the moment. We're reaping the rewards. The property market is booming, but do think long term. And a property investment is a long term undertaking. In order to make money on the value, etc., etc. So I think the best place to start is going to be to do your homework up front. Affordability, credit profile, get pre-qualified.
I was actually going to add that one, Natasha, before you added that, get pre-qualified, because it really does help. I've been able to get 100% home loans on multiple different home loans. So it is possible, I think, as long as you do have that affordability. And as I said earlier, I've always worked with a bond originator, so that makes quite a big difference, because already going in, once you're already thinking, okay, I want that second property, I want that third property, or that fourth or fifth property, you already know after you get pre-qualified that this is how much I likely qualify for. So you're not going to be caught surprised, start viewing, negotiating prices. Next thing you know, you're not going to be, you're not going to get that home loan amount extended to you. So the moment you get pre-qualified, you also then have a sense of the parameters under which you can kind of search, and that you can't go over, let's say it's 600,000 that you'll qualify for. You can't go over that mark because you won't get that home loan extended to you. We're going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be taking more of your questions and comments at home. Do send through those questions. It can be anything relating to property. We've got 3 experts who are answering all our burning property questions here on the Private Property Podcast as we celebrate 150 episodes of the podcast. We'll be back just after this. Welcome back to episode 150 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. We're celebrating 150 episodes of the Private Property Podcast, and we're giving away 1,000 Rand cash this evening later on the show. We're also going to be giving away 500 Rand cash every single day for the rest of the week. We want to hear from you. What have been some of the things that you've learned as you've been watching the Private Property Podcast, and how have they impacted you, particularly on your property journey? Share that experience with us down here below, and you stand a chance of walking away with that prize. This particular competition, we're only running on Facebook. I know some of you are watching us on Instagram and on YouTube. So if you want to enter this competition, do make sure that you go on over to our Facebook page. And one of the T's and C's, of course, of this competition is that you have to be watching live in order to be able to win. Because after we announce the winner, we need you to, raise your hand while we're live on air on our Facebook page in order to claim your prize. And if you don't, then we'll get to the second person that we would have shortlisted. So all the best to you at home. We're looking forward to hearing about the incredible ways that you've learned and some of the incredible things that you've learned from watching the podcast. We've got a question here from somebody who's becoming a top fan on our YouTube page, and that is Jemana Sanders, who asks, how can one start to build a personal relationship with bond originators like Uber? If I don't qualify today, is there a program one can enter to be guided to get to that qualifying status later? Natasha?
Absolutely. So all our clients are MVPs, but I think if you connect with a consultant that you form a relationship with, and they will keep in touch with you. And we would put clients that aren't potentially quite ready to purchase, be it due to affordability, be it due to existing exposure, or be it due to credit profile issues. So we will put those clients into what we call credit rehab, if it's a credit bureau issue, and we'll advise them exactly how to improve their score and how to manage their existing portfolio if it's an exposure issue, and certainly have a look at their income and expenses if it's an affordability issue. So that's what you can stay in touch with. And we pride ourselves on being available. I wouldn't say 24/7. We do like to sleep, but certainly on the WhatsApp and more of a direct relationship in terms of communication. You know, we empower people to own their homes, to own homes in South Africa. So we certainly are going to be in your corner and make sure that you're ready, even if it does require a little bit of extra work. We will always stay in touch.
We've got another question here coming in from Facebook, and Candice, I'm going to give you this question. It's coming from Kersha Kelly Crowe on Facebook, who says, advice is location, 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 but my affordability doesn't even allow me to buy anything in a decent area. How do I get a bond to afford in a home in a good area? So how should we be thinking, you know, through what you're able to afford with location? Because oftentimes people always talk, even when you're buying your primary residence or whether you're buying, you know, an investment property, they always like hopping on location, location, location. But the reality now, especially if you look at the big metros, certain locations are more expensive than other locations. So how do we manage what you're able to afford and making sure that it's in a relatively decent location?
So I think when it comes to location, it's really firstly important to determine whether there is a demand for the type of property that you're considering. You know, because we have this idea of a property and what type of property people would want to rent. We think we need to go into a specific area for that specific reason, because that's the type of property that we generally want to stay in. But it's important now to know that when you are an investor, you need to put your investor hat on, because you need to be investing into an area where you know that you're going to be able to attract tenants, for example. So you also need to understand what the dynamics is with regards to that area. So normally, you know, when I work with my coaching students, I say we need to become the area experts. You know, and normally if you don't know where to start, I would say, where are you today? And look at the surrounding areas. You know, so start researching the surrounding areas, go into those areas, understand what's happening in the area, understand where people want to rent property, what type of property people want to rent. And that will happen once you start talking also to the agents in the area. I normally say talk to about 3 or 4 different agents in the area, estate agents as well as letting agents, you know, and they all need to be different individuals. Some of them might be working at the same agencies, but try and get as many different perspectives as possible and understand what is happening in that particular area before you decide that you've now made a decision on the location. Very, very important. You have to invest in an area where there is demand for the type of property that you are considering.
Zeda, I want to bring you in here. There's a question that we've got from Facebook coming from Tsepo Mukubudi, who asks, what is the likelihood of a bank approving you for a home loan if you're full-time employed, but your contract is not permanent, just temporary? So contract workers, how do they navigate getting a home loan from the banks?
Thanks, Sama. That's a great question. I think from a qualifying criteria, we do look at self-employed as well as full-time employees, consumers. There is a criteria with a list of documents that you need to supply. From a contract worker perspective, unfortunately, if you're not permanently employed or you're not self-employed, you'll have to then send through a list of consistent documents. And there's a couple of income and expenses as well. But the idea is that you can complete your application and we'll assess it according to our list of documents that you need to supply. And I guess what's also important is that the affordability has to be there and a good credit standing as well. And a consistent, I think a consistent income as well, Zama.
Because I know one of the documents that the banks typically ask, especially if you don't bank with them, is your whether it's a 3-month or 6 months bank statement. So you also have to be able to prove that you're getting that income in. So it isn't enough to only say, here's my payslip, or this is where I work, but there are quite a number of supporting documents that typically go with a home loan application. Natasha, I want to bring you in this one, because this is one of those questions that's quite contentious. It's coming in from Mgateko Ahape, who asks, is there a difference between a court judgment being handed to the lawyers or being blacklisted? And do they have the same impact on a bond application? And do they have the same time to be cleared from the credit bureau?
So I think, any credit bureau issue, one might be under the false impression that it has to be a court judgment or it has to be a blacklist. We discussed in previous sessions that it can be something as simple as a payment profile issue, which means you've missed a couple of payments. So if I understand the question, the matter has gone legal. So if it's a court judgment, you have to hire an attorney to fight the matter, to motivate the matter for you. And I think in terms of timelines, it depends what the court's dockets are looking like. But you probably are going to have to wait at least 6 months, with proof of that rescission of that court judgment before applying, and do be prepared to explain why it occurred in the first place. The fact that it's paid up and that the judgment has been settled and we've got a rescission in order will be step number one. The bank is going to ask, even if it is 6 months after it's been cleared, what happened and why, because it's an indication of financial behavior. Financial behavior comes into how credit assesses the risk profile of the client.
We've got a great question here from Deboho Sikonde on YouTube, who asks, can I please get a clear explanation on POA properties and how the transaction actually goes like when buying such a property? Candice, I think I'll give those ones to you. So those price on application, how do those typically work?
Just say that again, Zama. What's the question?
So the question is, please can I get a clear explanation on the price on application properties and how their transaction actually goes like when buying such a property? So it's those properties, you'd usually typically see it when you can even see it on private property where they don't list the price, the right POA so it's essentially those properties.
Okay, so of course what's going to happen with that is you will need to contact the agent that has been listed against that particular listing on the property, and then you would need to get in touch with them and obviously understand what the property is selling for. Sometimes you'll find that the properties are negotiable, and maybe that's the reason why they're not necessarily displaying the price, but you still need to talk to the agent or whoever, or whether it's a private sale, you still need to contact them directly and understand what they're selling the property for. Once you understand what they're selling the property for, remember then it's important for you still to do or to pull a property valuation report on that particular property so that you can understand what properties are selling for in that particular area, because sometimes you find that some of the prices are a little bit inflated. So it's important for you to understand what properties have been selling for in that particular area. And I normally say look at the last 2 years to get a better idea. And then once you understand what similar type properties are selling for in that area, now you're obviously in a better position to have an idea of what type of price point will work. But of course, then you still need to go and view the property, and you still need to see what the condition is of the property, before you actually put in that offer, so that you need to understand if there's additional refurbishments that you maybe need to do and that type of thing. So always very important to also go and view the property to see what the condition or the state of the property is.
I mean, as much as we're getting, we're seeing quite a lot of use of technology in the property space, even when it comes to being able to do virtual viewings. I could probably never buy a property without viewing it. I probably wouldn't even sign on a lease agreement without physically going to view it. So no matter how sophisticated, we're seeing a lot of the tech that's being used right now to make sure that we have an immersive experience of what we're about to buy. Make sure you physically go, or if you're out of the country, because you also find people who are not in the country, send somebody that you trust who'll be able to go and really thoroughly check out the place, because there are things that you won't be able to pick up from a virtual viewing that you definitely want to make sure that you're able to see from a physical one. We've got a question here from Jemana Sanders again on YouTube, and it's directed at you, Zeda. And he asks, can I rent out my first property for a certain period in order to qualify for a second bond?
Thank you, Zama. That's a great question. I think as you, if these consumers are interested in purchasing a second property, to Natasha's earlier point, you would need to ensure that you look at your affordability. And when you're completing your second bond application, interested in buying the second one, you would then take into account your exposure, your income, your expenses. And if you are renting out your property, your first property, you'll have to evidence that that income is a form of rental income and submit it as part of your application process as well, because that contributes to your affordability and exposure. Yeah.
And I think I just want to do a quick follow-up there, Zeda. Just speak briefly about how the bank, especially ABSA, because I know the different banks do it differently, so I won't ask a blanket question on this one. How ABSA Home Loans looks at rental property when it comes to viewing it as additional property. I know, for example, certain banks will only look, let's say, only take 50% of the rental amount when they're looking at your affordability, some up to 70%. So not every bank will look at that rental income amount the same way. So even if you, let's say, are renting out a place for 10,000 Rand, if they're only taking 50%, so they're only going to say 5,000 will go towards the additional income that you're making. If they're only taking 70%, then it's 7,000. So how does ABSA Home Loans then view the rental income when it comes to people who want to buy, additional properties and access that home loan facility?
Thank you, Zama. Great question. So we actually have a great product that supports customers who's looking to grow their portfolios, and it's called the Buy to Let product for your typical investors growing their portfolio. My colleague Miguel previously on your show spoke quite greatly to property investment as well. What I will say is we do take into account and we look at the rental incomes based on the number of properties that you have from your property portfolio perspective, and we look at the percentage of what that rental income will be as part of your affordability. It also depends how many properties you have in your portfolio and what's the percentage that we'll take into account from a rental perspective based on the entire credit assessment, as well as you surfacing the evidence of those properties that is receiving rental income from that perspective as well. Yeah.
We are, of course, celebrating our 150th episode here on Private Property, and we are quite excited about the, episode 150 of the Private Property Podcast. We're going to be rounding up, taking those last few questions to our expert panel before we announce who the winner of that 1,000 Rand cash prize is. Remember, we are continuing with the festivities throughout the week, so you will be able to win 500 Rand cash for the rest of the week. And you have to be tuned in live to claim the prize. And if you don't in time, then we're going to have to go to the next person, and hopefully they'll be live and can claim it. This question is coming in from YouTube, and I'm going to ask it to you, Natasha. It's from Uluko Lombaleni, who says, hi, I've been recently employed overseas. I get paid fortnightly. What process would I have to follow in order to get me a home loan? And maybe to almost paraphrase, does it make a difference how often you get paid? Obviously he's abroad, so his admin will just be, he must have somebody decide to assist him with some of his admin. But when you look at the frequency of pay, does that have an effect on, what you would essentially need to do in order to get a home loan?
So the amounts of times a month that he gets paid is non-consequential. I think it's quite common overseas, particularly in Europe, to get wages. So some people get paid weekly. The banks obviously assess monthly income. So where you and I would provide a monthly payslip, he would provide 2 payslips a month. As long as those payments tally up with the salary advices we receive, and and obviously are reflected in the bank statements to the cent. The amount of time he's getting paid is not consequential. The fact that he is working abroad could increase the deposit requirement. So a South African citizen working abroad, depending on the bank, and Zeta can say where ABSA exactly is, we're looking at potentially a 70% loan to value, meaning 30% deposit down. So the frequency of payments not an issue. The fact that he is not currently living or working in South Africa, even though I'm assuming he's a South African citizen, it's going to attract an additional deposit requirement. We will also require a copy of work permit in that country, a copy of his employment contract in that country, and 6 months worth of proof of income, as opposed to 3 months for an employed South African resident.
We've got a question here. I'm going to ask it to you, Candice. It says, if you're self-employed and have good financial statements and bank statements meeting with the criteria needed, but not having a good credit score, can you still score a home? We tend to see that one, Candice. I mean, especially with property entrepreneurs who, can now say they've got their stream of income and, here are the bank statements, the money's coming in, but somewhere along the line, their credit score did get affected. How do you best then navigate accessing, buying a property when you know that you don't have the greatest credit score?
So as I mentioned in the beginning, remember I said it's also important to consider buying your investment property in a specific structure. So that will already assist you from that perspective. So whether it's a new company that you are registering, or maybe it's been recently registered, you are able to buy your property in that particular company. Of course, if that company doesn't have all of the financial statements, and let's say they're not all in order yet, you will need to be able to show that you've got the affordability. You will stand as surety as the individual for that particular purchase. Now, obviously, depending on your current situation, that will need to be reviewed by the bank. And in some cases, they might ask you to put down a deposit, just depending on your situation. And let's say maybe you are busy recovering from whatever situation you were in. You just need to understand what your affordability is, and if you want to buy property, what type of deposit would you need to put down as a start. And I think you need to take all of those things into account, in addition to buying property in a company structure that will also assist you from that perspective. So talk to Uber, talk to the banks, understand what they need from you from that particular perspective, and then make sure you provide the right information. And of course, remember, if you are not ready to buy your property today, let's say, for example, for whatever reason, they give you feedback, you need to implement that feedback, it's okay. So even if you need to go back and work on yourself for the next 6 months or next 12 months, you know what you're working towards. So I think that's the important thing. And then, of course, there are other strategies in property as well. And I'm not necessarily going to go into this, but I just want to say there are strategies sometimes where you are able to buy a property and you're able to sell it at a profit. And there are different ways that we're able to pursue that. And I'm sure we'll have a conversation around that at another time, Zama. But just remember, get yourself educated, especially if you want to become a property investor. Understand the different strategies, and then also see what you will be able to leverage at this stage, and then do whatever you need to do to get yourself ready for that first investment purchase.
Ladies, I actually want to leave it there for this evening, because I think this is one of those things where if people are watching us for the first time, they certainly have gotten a sense of what they've been missing out on. So they're really great episodes that they're able to go back to and watch. And if they're watching us for the first time, well, then there's plenty more of this in the future episodes. This was a great snapshot of some of the great topics that we've covered over the past couple of months, and some of what you can also, look forward to, because with property, there are always new things you can learn. I mean, I've been doing it for quite a number of years, and I do it daily for many hours at a go. And there's still so many new, exciting things that I learn along, even in my own journey. So having a better understanding of where you are, where you want to go, and the best ways to get there becomes so important. But before I let you go, I think I'm going to do a last round of, if you could give our viewers at home one tip when it comes to their, home ownership journey, what would that one tip be? I'm going to start with you, Natasha.
I mean, I think if you're embarking on the property journey, whether it be as a first-time buyer, whether it be as an investor, please don't feel alone, don't feel isolated, and don't feel overwhelmed. there really are so many resources out there to support you, to prepare you, and to empower you to become a homeowner. And we're all on your team, especially the ladies out there. They're emerging more and more as property buyers and players in the market. We've got your back. We're here to support you, and you can do it.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Zeda, what would that one tip be from your side?
One tip, I think we will, from an AXA perspective, I'd like to encourage all consumers to engage our website. Please visit. We have great home loan products to suit your needs, but more importantly, we have good pre-educational buying tools that can help you make those decisions around home ownership. Please utilize them to help you make the decision. We are here to support you and journey with you to your home loan needs. Thank you.
And Candice, can you wrap it up for us? What would be your one tip be to our viewers at home?
So I would definitely say, even if you are considering buying your personal residence, always look at how you're able to maximize the income on that particular property. So let's say, for example, you're buying a property, but you are able to rent out maybe a cottage, or you're able to convert a garage into a cottage and rent it out. You know, consider those type of situations. Why? Because you'll be able to put in place another stream of income. So even if you are staying on your particular property, ensure that you always find ways to maximize the income potential from that property that you are currently staying on.
I'm actually going to add on to that one and say, especially to the young professionals, because being a young professional myself, I know when I was in my early 20s, you start working, one of the first few things that you want to do is get out of home. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have an option. Home might be in other provinces or too far for you to be driving at work. But if living at home is possible and the home environment is conducive and healthy enough for you to live at home, I would urge you not to willingly move out of home, especially if you have property ambitions. I think you don't quite realize the amount of money you end up spending when you're not living at home, and regardless of whether you're renting or you've bought the place. So if you're able to stay at home as long as possible, it works even perfectly if you want to be buying different investment properties, because your cost of living in a property is almost zero. Basically, just make sure obviously you buy groceries for your parents. So don't be that child that doesn't do that. But you're not going to be paying for rates and taxes. You're not going to be paying levies if you're living in a complex or estate. You're not going to be paying bond. You're not going to be paying rent. So if you're able to get away with it, I think do it for as long as possible. And if anything, maybe it must be like your parents who are like, hey, you're now in your 30s, do you not want to move out? But as I say, if home is healthy and it's not too far, that's definitely one thing that you should consider doing in order to maximize where your rands are going to go when it comes to all things relating to property. I want to thank my guests. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us this evening. It has been such a pleasure to have you here on the Private Property Podcast. And thank you for coming back. I'm sure we're always going to invite you to come back on the show yet again. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Really a pleasure.
Thank you, Zama. Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you very much to my guest. That was Zeda Manuel, who's a product portfolio manager for first-time home buys at ABSA Home Loans. We are going to be speaking to somebody from the ABSA team again on Wednesday. We always have them every Wednesday. But this evening we thought, look, let's bring somebody in from a bank's perspective, because they've been walking this journey with us on the podcast. I also had Candice Van Wyk, who's a co-founder. She's an entrepreneur and also an investor herself at Property Pick, as well as Natasha Champion, who's a regional sales manager at Uber Home Loans. It has been a great conversation, that I think if you're watching us for the first time, you now have a sense of what you can expect in future episodes, but you also have a sense of what you've missed out. So I do urge you to go back and watch some of the incredible episodes that we've had in the past. It's always great once you start learning new things, and when you watch a new episode, you have a new question to ask because you've already covered some of the other topics in the past. Well, before I wrap up, I would usually be saying my goodbyes. Now, we did say we have a great giveaway, and maybe let's actually take a quick break. Let's take a quick break and come back and do the giveaway, because I want to keep you in suspense just a little bit longer. We're going to go for a quick break and we'll be back just after this. Ladies, thank you. Welcome back to episode 150 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamanto Khumalo. That was a great episode. I mean, as the ladies were saying goodbye off air, Natasha was like, it was all women, it was ladies. And I was like, yes, that was deliberate. I think one of the big things that we're seeing is that women are quite the force when it comes to property buying patterns. I remember there was even an article that came out last year. The new data is also indicating that women are, buying property way more than their male counterparts, and then oftentimes it's unmarried women who are buying these properties. So I love talking property, and I particularly love talking property to women. And I think as women, we sometimes have our own challenges when it comes to thinking through property ownership. So it's always great to also be able to have that support amongst us. And certainly, I mean, and I would say this, I've said it before, that we shouldn't get intimidated by buying property because we are women. So that's something that we will always be, or certainly that I'll always be pushing quite a lot, because I'm quite big on making sure that as women we're able to access these facilities that oftentimes our mothers probably weren't able to access, and certainly our grandmothers weren't able to access. Well, that brings us then to our competition this evening and announcing the winner of the competition. Of course, we're celebrating the 150 episodes of the Private Property Podcast. And as part of our celebration, we're running the competition for the whole week, where for this evening, you stand a chance of walking away with that 1,000 Rand cash prize for sharing your testimony on how the podcast has helped you in your life and on your own property journey. And for the rest of the week, we'll then be giving away 500 Rand cash throughout the episode. And one of the terms and conditions, and we have posted them down here below, is that you have to be live, you have to be watching us live in order to be able to claim the prize. And once you do, then the team will alert me and you won't need to go to the next person. But if you're not watching live, you won't be able to do so, and we'll go to the next person. Well, we've chosen the winner for tonight's competition. So the person who will be walking away with that 1,000 Rand cash prize. I'm going to read their testimony first before I say who the winner is. And their testimony says, I've learned a lot from these live podcasts. Through the live podcasts, I've learned about the right to the legal way of buying a property in order to avoid being scammed. These live podcasts equipped me with a very rich knowledge when it comes to property investment. I now fully understand that I can make a lot of money through property investment. I could buy a property, then rent it out. These podcasts have also made me realize the different types of properties, especially when it comes to the value of, for an example, most properties that are at the suburbs are much expensive, more than the ones in townships. I've also been equipped with the importance of understanding an issue of the title deed, the presence of lawyers, rates, important documents to sign when buying and selling property. I learned all about this free of charge from the podcasts. I now almost know everything about property. I wish to see more of these live podcasts. The knowledge we get from them is deeper and is very valuable and rich. Hashtag 150 live podcasts. I absolutely love that, because I think this is one of the things that we wanted to get out there, especially to our viewers at home, is understanding property from the comfort of your home, being able to ask questions regardless of where you are in your property journey. And sometimes you may just be still thinking about it, so you haven't started actively looking for that property. And the lucky winner who walks away with that 1,000 Rand cash prize and who wrote that incredible testimonial is Mkhuseli Kustamdla. So congratulations to Mkhuseli Kustamdla. You walk away with that 1,000 Rand, but in order for you to properly walk away with it, you have to comment down here below and raise your hand so that we're able to give you that 1,000 Rand cash prize. I'm going to give him a minute or two. The team will let me know if he has claimed his prize. Otherwise, we're going to have to roll over and give it to the next person. The team will let me know shortly. So we are waiting for you there, Mkhulegi. So do make sure that you comment down here below to grab that 1,000 Rand cash prize. And I think certainly on my end, I mean, we are asking you what you've learned while doing the podcast, while watching rather the podcast, and how it has impacted you. I think if I have to reflect on what I've learned doing the podcast, and how it has certainly impacted me. I've been doing property for quite a number of years, sort of in different capacities, and there are various things that I do, from school to my own property businesses and managing my own portfolio. And I think one of the things that this podcast has shown me is there is always something new to learn. So regardless of how much you know, how many years you've been doing it, there's always something new to learn. And I see we've got Kuseli has claimed his prize, he's raised his hand. So congratulations there, Kuseli. Thank you very much for identifying yourself. You walk away with that 1,000 Rand cash prize. And it was that easy. So if you want to also make sure that you're able to walk away with cash prizes for the duration of this whole week, we are giving away 500 Rand for the rest of the week. Each and every single episode, you have to be live. You have to be able to raise your hand at the end of the show when we do that giveaway, and you walk away with that cash prize. Well, as I was saying, there's always something new to learn. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the game. It doesn't matter how many properties you've done. There really is always something new that you can learn. And I've certainly learned quite a lot from a lot of the great questions that you as viewers at home keep asking. So that's why I always urge you, send them through. Sometimes you are, as much as you're asking your question, other people are also learning from the answers that we get. So we're a community that's learning together, that's growing together, that's buying property together, that's renting together, that's building together. And I think it's so important for us that as we are participating even in the conversations that we're having, that we are enriching each other and sharing with each other our experiences. Well, folks, that's it from me, Zamantungwa Khumalo. We're going to leave it there this evening for episode 150. Thank you very much for watching us for the past 150 episodes, for the comments, for the shares, for the tweets, for all the green hearts, for the hashtags that you've used, for entering the different competitions that we've run over the past couple of months. We're going to continue giving you great content, and we're certainly going to love hearing more from you in the months to come. We're very excited for always elevating the show as much as possible and making sure that we give you the best value as possible. Well, that's it from us and the rest of the team here on Private Property. We do look forward to giving you more content and making sure that we make our spaces what we want. I mean, we have that sign up that says your space, your rules. So making sure that we make rules for our own respective spaces and continue to share those experiences with each other. I'm going to be back on your screens tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Until then, I'm on Twitter on @Zamantungwa_K. And as usual, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
Hi, I'm Julia Chen. I'm a restaurateur living in the Cape Town City Bowl. My restaurant, Hallelujah, is situated right in the heart of the city. Over the last few years, the influx of young professionals has created so many new and exciting things to see and do. The rejuvenation of the city has been something really special to experience. There are some really beautiful suburbs in our neighborhood. Nestled below the iconic Table Mountain lies Oranienburg and Tamboerskloof, filled with unique and beautiful homes. There's such a young vibe in the city with an incredible blend of diverse cultures catering to everybody's desire. Within the city, there are so many genuine and passionate people, and you'll find them in places like the Woodstock Exchange, offering everything from handcrafted works of art to a culinary experience hard to forget. For those who enjoy the outdoors, Lion's Head and Table Mountain are phenomenal places to explore. Living in the City Bowl has definitely given me my dream lifestyle, and this is my neighborhood.